Welcome to another instalment of WSR TV, this time presented by the Diesel and Electric Preservation Group. My name is Andy Royal and I'm one of the trustees of the Depg. This is the first of a series of videos and gives an introduction to the Depg. We start by outlining the origins of the Depg and providing some background to each of the locomotives that are in our current fleet. The group is based at Williton on the West Somerset Railway and has a history of involvement with the WSR that goes back to the very early days of the railway. In fact, one of our Hymek locomotives holds the title for the longest serving locomotive on the West Somerset Railway. The Depg started life in 1972 as the Diesel and Electric Group, and its initial focus was to publish books and organise rail tours based on modern traction. The group started by publishing the Intercity Express newsletters and soon became established as a source of good and reliable information. It was only 4 years after the end of steam on the main line, and preservation groups all over the country were scrambling to raise funds to save their favourite locomotives from extinction. This meant that the media were focused on these efforts, and there was very little information available to followers of the so-called modern traction that had displaced steam. The displacement of steam by diesel and electric traction was the result of the British Transport Commission's Modernisation Plan of 1955, and a careful transition had been planned where locomotive builders from both the private and public sectors would develop the technology and the required manufacturing techniques and would deliver small numbers of their designs for evaluation in service conditions alongside steam. This was known as the pilot scheme. It included 171 locomotives of 12 classes from 8 manufacturers. The plan was sound, but the reality was something completely different. By 1959, faced with a deteriorating financial situation and a severe shortage of labour, the pilot scheme had to be abandoned, and the British Transport Commission placed production orders for designs that had not even reached prototype stage. The inevitable rush to mass dieselisation was to cause chaos on the railways of Britain for many years to come, as unproven and unreliable machines were put in service alongside steam. By 1965, faced with a reduction in route mileage and a still worsening financial situation, the British Railways Board developed a National Traction Plan and decided that classes of locomotive with a poor performance record or those that had proven expensive to maintain would be removed from service. This included some classes that were still in production. With steam slated for complete withdrawal by 1968, the focus of the preservation world remained firmly on steam. By 1972, there had already been mass withdrawals of several classes of diesel and electric locomotives, and almost all had met the cutter's torch without any effort being made to save and preserve a single example. Some major historical pieces were lost forever. As an example, the LMS Twins were the first all-British mainline diesel locomotives with a design dating back to 1946, but they were cut up in 1968 without a thought for their historical value. After eliminating the prototypes and the so-called troublesome classes, the National Traction Plan then rounded on the smaller classes of successful locomotives, particularly those with hydraulic transmissions, as these were viewed as non-standard. The warships went in 1972 and the Hymeks were slated for withdrawal in 1973. The Westerns were to follow in 1977. Some of these useful and hard-working locos had been in service for less than 10 years, less than half of their planned service lifetime. This set the stage for the diesel and electric group. In 1973, the BR management decided to offer a rail tour to commemorate the Hymeks, a relatively small class of diesel hydraulic locomotives that were among the last products to be built at the famous Beyer Peacock works in Gorton, Manchester. The Hymeks used a fast-running V16 diesel engine of German design, a Maybach, but built under license in the UK by Bristol Siddeley. This was married to a Maybach Mekydro hydraulic transmission that was also made under license in the UK by Stone Industries. The Hymeks were probably the most successful and most reliable of the diesel hydraulic classes and were very popular with both BR crews and management. The Hymek Swan Song rail tour ran on the 22nd of September 1973. It was double-headed from Paddington to Hereford, returning via Didcot. The route was chosen so that it included destinations where steam locomotives could be seen in operation, because BR were uncertain of filling all the seats of a diesel-only rail tour. The tour was a sellout and was the first of many such rail tours. During the journey, several enthusiasts raised the suggestion that one of the Hymeks should be saved, and the D and EG became the focal point for this effort. After fundraising had been completed, a bid was submitted in July 1975, and the D and EG became the proud owners of D7017, straight out from BR service. It was a very brave step for an organisation that was hitherto involved only in publishing. It was decided to move the loco to the embryonic West Somerset Railway because the Minehead branch was a line where the Hymeks had regularly worked. In fact, it was a Hymek that hauled the special train for the Beatles during the filming of It's a Hard Day's Night in 1964. The long and steeply graded line was well suited to Hymeks. The locomotive was initially moved to Taunton Station in July 1975 because the WSR was not ready to accept it at that time, but it made the move to Minehead on the 25th of March 1976, and it hauled its first train on the WSR on the 19th of March 1977, the Quantock Flyer. The move to Williton came in 1979, and D7017 was initially housed in the old goods shed at Williton Station. In the background, the D and EG had been expanding its membership and fundraising capability, and in May of 1977 it acquired sister locomotive D7018. This locomotive was based at the Didcot Railway Centre of the Great Western Society, so the D and EG now had two activities ongoing at two locations. In 1980, the group acquired a Class 14 diesel hydraulic from Blue Circle Cement Company in Westbury. This locomotive had been built at Swindon in 1964, and it was a type that had been designed to take over from the classic GWR pannier tank that was well known in almost every corner of the former GWR network. Unfortunately, the loss of branch lines as a result of the infamous Beeching Report, the reshaping of British Railways, of March 1963, meant that the work that had been intended for these locos was evaporating even as the locos were being built. Many of them did not perform any useful work for BR but were stored before being sold to industry, most being sold to the steel companies and the National Coal Board. Our loco, number D9526, worked at Blue Circle between 1970 and 1977 and was acquired by the Depg after it suffered a major engine failure. The loco went to Williton Depot for a thorough overhaul that lasted 4 years, and it hauled its first train on the WSR on the 14th of July 1984. In 1985, the group approached Foster Yeoman, the owners of Merehead Quarry between Shepton Mallet and Frome in Somerset, and inquired about the preserved Western class locomotive that had been a static exhibit at their site since 1977. The Westerns, the most powerful and prestigious class of diesel hydraulic locomotives, had been introduced in 1961 to handle the most important expresses from Paddington and also to handle the heaviest freight flows. Such was the versatility of the design. The heavy stone trains from Merehead to the London area were regularly hauled by Westerns, including D1035, which carried the name Western Yeoman, and when they were withdrawn from service, the Foster Yeoman Company decided to acquire their favourite locomotive to keep at Merehead on static display. Unfortunately, Western Yeoman had met with the cutter's torch before they could acquire it, so D1010 WESTERN CAMPAIGNER was acquired instead and was renamed as Western Yeoman for their purpose. A deal was reached in 1985 whereby the D&EG would take over the care and maintenance of D1010 with a view to restoring her to full operating condition. The loco was moved from Merehead to Didcot and was able to move under her own power in May 1987, albeit with only one of her two Maybach type engines working. The loco moved to Williton in 1990 and has operated under her real name and under her alias on many occasions since. The loco became the property of the Depg in 1993, the name of our group having changed in 1987 and charitable status having been achieved in 1988. In 1997, Clive Burrows, one of the founder members of the D&EG, acquired a Class 33 Crompton diesel-electric locomotive numbered 33048, formerly D6566, and moved it to Williton to be managed and operated by the Depg. This class of locomotives came from another well-known but extinct manufacturer, the Birmingham Railway Carriage and Wagon Company Limited, or BRCW for short. The loco was built in Smethwick, Birmingham in 1961 and entered service on the Southern region, based at Hither Green in southeast London. The loco arrived at Williton in May 1997 and hauled her first service on the WSR in October that same year. In 2005, Clive Burrows acquired another Class 33, this time the fire damaged 33057, formerly D6575, with the objective of providing a source of spare parts for D6566. However, after close inspection at Williton Depot, the loco was considered as repairable, and after 7 years of hard work and investment, D6575 entered WSR service in June 2012. In 2007, in response to a perceived need to haul 12-coach air-conditioned charter trains from Bishop's Lydeard through to Minehead and back, the Depg acquired a Class 47 diesel-electric locomotive that had risen to fame as being the last locomotive to haul a cross-country train from Penzance to Manchester, the loco in question being D1661 Northstar. The loco had been withdrawn from mainline service in February 2007 after a mainline career lasting 42 years and underwent an overhaul and repaint into the original two-tone green livery at the Brushworks in Loughborough. The resplendent loco then worked from Derby to Minehead at the head of a charter service that also included another 47 and a Class 45 Peak that were later used to haul the charter back to Derby. Northstar entered service on the WSR shortly afterwards and worked continuously for another 11 years before being withdrawn for body repairs. The most recent acquisition by the Depg has yet to enter service on the WSR. In fact, the loco does not currently exist as a single entity, but rather a collection of parts. The loco in question is a Class 14 diesel hydraulic, built in Swindon in 1964 and withdrawn from BR service only 5 years later due to lack of work. The traditional trip freight work-ins that the loco had been designed to do had all but dried up because of the closure of the branch lines and goods sheds and the transfer of such freight from rail to road. This left the fleet of 56 locomotives with little to no work. As in the case of our D9526, these well-built and sturdy machines soon found new work at industrial complexes around the country, and D9518 spent the next 18 years doing hard labour at the NCB's Ashington Colliery in Northumberland. Acquired by the Depg in 2011 after 9 years of static display at the Rutland Railway Museum and 5 years of storage at the Nene Valley Railway, the loco was severely worn and suffering from neglect, with several key parts missing, having been used as a spares source for other Class 14 restoration projects. The Depg team started work in 2012 and the loco has been completely stripped down to the basic components, all of which are undergoing the slow process of restoration as a background project. We hope to see 9518 back in service at some time in the not too distant future. This completes the current lineup of Depg locomotives, but we have not mentioned the many other locomotives that have been owned or operated by the Depg over the years, many of which feature in the WSR archive photographs and in our own personal collections. We will cover these locomotives at another time. Our intention is to go into detail on each member of our current and former fleet, and also to cover locomotives that have visited the WSR as guests for short periods, such as diesel galas. Our next instalment will feature our Hymeks D7017 and D7018. That's all we have time for now, but we hope you found this first article of interest. Thank you for supporting WSR TV.